When you don't have a set shop space and you have to work outside in the great outdoors, the weather can play a big role in how efficiently you work or whether you can work at all. If it's raining or snowing, it's not a pleasant day to work, and out in the hot sun can get to be a problem as well. Plus, this direct sunlight on your work makes it harder to see what color you're at, and it may be hard to tell forge welding temperature, and if you're hardening and tempering, it makes it really difficult. So ideally, you work inside. But for the temporary forge setup that I'm looking at today, you can certainly build this outside, and it makes it a little bit more achievable if you don't have a building you can work in. If you have a suitable building that's safe to work in, by all means you can do this inside, but you'll probably need a chimney to vent the smoke out of, and that just adds to the expense of getting set up. Now in the previous video, using the hole in the ground with the hair dryer, I used some bricks to kind of line the hole and put dirt inside that to build up a fire pot. There were lots of comments about the dangers of burning a fire right next to the bricks or right next to rocks. People say they'll explode. No, they will not explode. There's no explosives involved in this. They may get hot and they may fracture. They may break and they may shatter, but it's not an explosion. But in any case, you're not building a fire against the brick, or in this case, cinder blocks. You're building a fire in the dirt, and you need enough dirt to insulate whatever the structure is. A lot of people build similar forges just out of wood, and they refer to that as just a dirt box forge. It's the dirt that you're building a fire in, and you have to have enough to keep the wood from starting on fire. Probably still a good idea to keep a fire extinguisher or a couple of 5-gallon buckets of water around, just in case you guessed wrong. But if you keep the fire in the dirt, the cinder blocks are not going to break, and they are surely never going to explode. Now when we did the hole in the ground forge, we just used a simple hair dryer, and that worked. But I think this is going to be better. This is a bouncy house blower, and it's provided by the sponsor of today's video, Vevor. This is a centrifugal type blower and is very similar to an electric forge blower. Matter of fact, I've seen lots of people using this style blower on more permanent forge setups than this. They're using them on regular coal forges with a regular fire pot, brake drum forges, and I've even seen some people using these very successfully on blown gas forges like a ribbon burner. So this seems to me like an excellent budget setup, way less expensive than buying a forge blower from one of the blacksmithing suppliers, although I suspect those will last longer. This is made out of plastic. That's a downside. If you end up dropping something hot on it, you're going to melt a hole in it, and you might break it just if you drop something heavy on it. So you need to protect this and keep it out of the way if you can. Ideally, this should have some sort of a gate valve to control the airflow. It doesn't have any kind of a rheostat. I think you might be able to put a rheostat on this, but I've never tried that, and I know some motors don't behave well if you put a rheostat on them and don't run them at full speed. If you've tried that and had success or utter failure, let us know down in the comments section. Anyway, some sort of a gate valve put either in line with the outlet of this and the pipe, just one of those little sliding valves. I used to have one on the other coal forge. It just doesn't fit this blower. Or something that blocks the inlet air would work. But I've been playing with this a little bit, and I'm finding that if I leave it back from the pipe, all I have to do is just turn it a little bit, and that changes how much air actually goes into the forge, and that works pretty well for this temporary setup. If this is going to be a permanent setup, I would do something different. So once again, I'd like to thank Vevor for sending this blower out and for sponsoring today's video. In a future video, we'll take a look at that do-it-yourself classic, the brake drum forge, and this will be an ideal blower to put on one of those. Now that brings us to the anvil. I'm going to use the same concept, a sledgehammer head, as an anvil, but I'm going to see if we can improve it quite a bit by mounting it to a stump. Here again, people like to get really excited about this because of that old myth that if you strike two hammers together, they'll explode. Well, just like bricks and cinder blocks don't actually explode, hammers don't actually explode. Something would have to be horribly wrong for them even to shatter or break into multiple pieces, although I suppose hypothetically that's a possibility. Now the people on the other side of that discussion like to point out that Mythbusters did an episode where they absolutely proved that myth false, that there's no risk whatsoever striking two hammers together. Well, remember, Mythbusters is a show meant for entertainment. It really is not a show to prove facts absolutely, and they just don't have the resources or the time to explore all the possibilities. The truth is, you can knock a chip off of a hammer striking it with another hammer. It doesn't happen very often, but it is a possibility. The reason so many old anvils are in bad repair is because people have struck that anvil with a hammer. They've missed the work they're forging, they've hit it with a hammer way too many times, and they finally knocked a chip off the edge. So it's possible to knock a chip out of any anvil, whether that's an antique anvil, a new anvil, or a hammer, even a big chunk of mild steel. With enough work done on it and the edges start to break down, you can knock a chip out of it. Keeping the edges well dressed helps prevent that, and that's the reason you should always inspect all of your tools, your punches, your chisels, your set tools, your hammers, your anvil, anything else that's being struck. Sooner or later is going to wear, sooner or later you're going to develop stress cracks, and sooner or later they will chip and throw chips out if you don't keep them in good repair. And grinding the mushrooming back down goes a long way to prevent that. And of course, most of those chips probably just fall to the ground or fly off somewhere other than you. You're only in one small point of that global perspective that chip could fly through. It's 360 degrees in every direction. But it's also the reason you should always wear your safety glasses, because the worst thing that could happen with a chip is that it hits you in the eye. If you talk to a lot of blacksmiths and other metal workers, sooner or later you're going to have somebody relate an incident where they've had a chip from one tool or another embed in a wrist or a hand. The only time I've ever drawn blood from a chip, it was in my abdomen, and it warranted a CAT scan because the doctor was concerned that it might have gone deep enough to hit my liver, which it had not. But that was off of a well-used, well-abused anvil in a school setting and not off of a hammer. So it is a risk, and the number one way to avoid that is to make sure you got hot iron between the hammer and the anvil, whatever you're using for an anvil. And if you can't hit the iron, if your aim with the hammer is so bad that you're all over the place with every blow, shut the fire down, put it out, go get some 2x4s and a box of nails and practice driving nails until you can hit the nail on the head. Swinging a hammer is certainly a learned skill, and it's something worth practicing without wasting fuel or materials for blacksmithing. So with that said, let's go ahead and more permanently anchor a sledgehammer to a stump so I don't have to bend over quite so far. This is another piece of black locust that I happen to have around. It's not as tall as I would like it to be for this anvil, but it's going to work just fine. Now with this set off to the side, I have room to add some other small auxiliary anvils to this in the future as we work on this setup. And I'm going to go ahead and silicone it in so that it's good and solid. Then add a bar through the eye of the hammer, anchor that down, not only to help hold the hammer in place better, but that gives me a horn sticking off the edge of the stump that I can bend small rings around or hooks. Now remember at the beginning of the video when I said that weather plays a role in how efficiently you can work or whether you can work at all? Well, today is no exception. The hot, dry weather now has us under a complete burn ban, which doesn't surprise me because there's a wildfire over the hill that has been burning now for almost a week, getting bigger, zero containment. It isn't threatening us here, but if the wind comes up, it could. And the last thing I want to do is throw some sparks into the dry grass around here and start a second fire for people to worry about. So we're going to have to pick this up again after we get some rain or maybe some snow. In about a week, we've got snow on the forecast, so hopefully we'll get a few inches of snow. And once it warms up a little bit and I can clear the snow out of this, I may have to redo the dirt in this because it'll probably deteriorate, although I think I'll put a cover over this just in case. Then we'll take a look at doing a project in this forge, and because it'll just be about forging the project at that point, it'll be a more complete forging video instead of being primarily about the forge. So it kind of works out to set this up as a two-part video. Whether that second part is next week or the week after, hard to say. We're just gonna have to wait and see what the weather does and when they lift the fire ban. But one way or the other, I'll be back next week with another video. In the meantime, I hope you have time in your day to get out into your shop, make something, stay safe, wear your safety glasses. We'll see you for the next video.